discussing ways to tackle global threats by working together. The Secretary of State has also been talking about two world powers that are not part of the G7, Russia and China. NBC News foreign correspondent Matt Bradley joins us now from London. So, Matt, Secretary Blinken says the U.S. wants a more stable relationship with Russia. Here's what he had to say about that.
We are focused very much on Russia's actions and what course it chooses to take. But we're not looking to escalate. We would prefer to have a more stable, more predictable relationship. And if Russia moves in that direction, so will we.
So, Matt, how is this diplomatic approach being received at the G7?
Well, that's hard to tell exactly. I mean, we just started, really, and there's going to be a lot of different meetings covering a lot of different areas. You know, Russia is only one part of this. Each meeting with all these other foreign ministers, it's only going to be a couple of minutes, maybe even 30 minutes. It's really quite a quick, almost a speed dating kind of arrangement. But when we're talking about Russia, everybody's in agreement. Remember that it was only a little while ago that this G7 used to be called the G8 because Russia was part of it. And it was only when Russia invaded Crimea and destabilized eastern Ukraine, that's when they got kicked out, and the G7 became the G7. But Russia is still a very large economy. It's very influential. And Blinken and the Biden administration is going to be running into a lot of problems when it comes to dealing with Europe on Russia, because Europe is drifting slightly away from the U.S. position on Russia, and that's because of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. They were relying on Russia for gas energy. And the Blinken's office and the Biden administration, they're going to have to decide whether or not they're going to try to basically obstruct this issue, whether they're going to try to effectively keep the Europeans from buying a lot of gas from Russia, or whether or not they're going to allow for that kind of cross-border trade and a new pipeline. That is going to be a thorny issue for these talks. Joe?
Matt, Secretary of State Blinken also spoke about relations between the U.S. and China. What did he have to say about that?
Well, here's what he had to say. I mean, really, when we're talking about China, we're talking about one of the goals of the G7, which is to try to uphold the rules-based international order that the Trump administration kind of walked away from, while at the same time putting leaders like China's leader and Russia's leader on notice. Now, basically, restoring the rules-based order would mean confronting autocrats and those who would try to weaken the West in the face of a multipolar world. And that is what Blinken has been trying to do. Here's what he said about China.
It is not our purpose to try to contain China or to hold China down. What we are trying to do is to uphold the international rules-based order that our countries have invested so much in over so many decades, to the benefit, I would argue, not just of our own citizens, but of people around the world, including, by the way, China.
So this is an interesting one because, of course, the Biden administration is trying to differentiate themselves from Trump. China and Xi Jinping, its leader, was one of Trump's favorite punching bags on the global stage. But the Biden administration, in fact, their policies toward China aren't necessarily all that different from the Trump administration's, but they're trying to reset the tone. They're trying to create a new style of diplomacy. And that's what we're seeing at the G7 here in London this week. Joe?
And Matt, real quickly, this is the first G7 meeting of the Biden administration. How will the Secretary of State try to reset the tone when it comes to American diplomacy?
Well, it's not only that. It's the first meeting of these G7 foreign ministers in about 2 years. Now, what's changed since then? In the past 2 years, two really, really big things: a global pandemic and the departure of President Donald Trump. Now, both of those things have really driven home to the leaders of the G7. And again, this is a talk shop that's all about the international rules-based order, as you just heard from Anthony Blinken himself. So when we're talking about the rules-based international order, that is something that Donald Trump and his administration really singularly focused on actually destroying. They made it very public. And so this is what this administration is going to be trying to do on the international stage, trying to repair the plumbing that just lines global diplomacy. Joe?
All right, Matt Bradley, thank you so much. And let's take a look at what else is making news around the world this morning. NBC's Janice Mackey-Freyer joins us from Beijing with more. Hey, Janice, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. It's really coming down to the wire in Israel for Benjamin Netanyahu as he's trying to get together a government after failing to win a majority in elections in March, the fourth inconclusive election in just 2 years. The deal that he has offered to his rival, Naftali Bennett, is that he would offer the leadership of the country for 1 year if Bennett agrees to form a coalition with him, which is strange because Bennett won only 7 of 120 seats. So far, Bennett seems to have rejected this idea of a rotating premiership, but Netanyahu is trying to do what he can to extend his 12 years in power. Remember, he is also now facing corruption charges. He has until midnight tonight to form a government. Otherwise, Israel will be headed to an unprecedented 5th election by August. Mexico's president has apologized to the indigenous Mayan people for abuses committed against them over the 5 centuries since the Spanish conquest. Andrés Manuel López Obrador acknowledged colonial domination and what he called terrible abuses, an historic admission. This is also a milestone for Mayan leaders who have pushed for greater recognition of the thousands of people who were killed and had their culture eradicated. However, there is some skepticism about the timing of this official apology, though, with just 1 month to go before crucial legislative and municipal elections in Mexico. And finally, Joe, a heads up, really, heads up. There's a Chinese rocket that is falling back to Earth, and it will make an uncontrolled re-entry at a crash site that at this point is unknown. It is the 100-foot-high core of the rocket that launched China's first module for the space station that it's building. This core is now orbiting the Earth about every 90 minutes at an altitude of 200 miles, going roughly 17,000 miles per hour. So experts expect that parts of it will burn up, but some parts of it could re-enter the Earth. Where will it land? That's the golden question. Experts figure it could be as far north as New York, Madrid, Beijing, or as far south as Wellington or southern Chile, or anywhere in between.
Wow.
So this is a good time to remember that 70% of the Earth's surface is covered in water, so there is a very strong chance that this debris will be scattered at sea. But this is your FYI for the day.
There's also a chance it could land on land, and that would not be great. All right, Janice, thank you for that comforting note. Appreciate it.
In the words of one expert, they said, it's very bad.
Yeah, all right, it sounds like it. All right, well, we'll keep an eye on that one. All right, thank you, Janice. Coming up, our week-long series spotlighting female business owners and working women. On deck, Pinky Cole and Slutty Vegan, her plant-based brick-and-mortar turned national phenomenon. That's next.
You're watching NBC News Now. For many in this community, this is not new.
I know plenty of Asian Americans who feel very unsafe today.
We're getting past the point of being okay with just a post, with just a statement. We want action.
Ready, actors.
An indie horror film, a talented young actress, and a deadly shot. Dateline's newest podcast, Killer Roll.
Action!
Subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts. Our world is facing some big challenges. Chuck Todd breaks them down. Every Thursday, a deep dive into a new topic.
Instead of covering all the big stories, we're going to cover one single subject impacting American politics.
Exploring and explaining the critical issues that affect our future. Meet the Press Reports. Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern. Streaming on NBC News Now and available next day on demand on Peacock.
Right now on Morning News Now, we begin with the dawn of a new day in Washington.
Mr. President, you've been aspiring to this office for your whole career.
We're looking at vaccination manufacturing to nearly double over the course of the next month.
I just want to show you what's happening right now. They're making their way up the steps of the U.S. Capitol.
Our team of correspondents is here.
For breaking news in our changing world, download the NBC News app.
The COVID vaccines are here. and it's been a little confusing. So it's more important than ever to make a plan. Roll up your sleeves and visit planyourvaccine.com to figure out where and when you're going to get your vaccine.
Congratulations to Lester Holt, the most trusted TV news anchor in America, on receiving the prestigious Edward R. Murrow Lifetime Achievement Award for a career dedicated to excellence in journalism.
With only a few weeks to go until Memorial Day, some seasonal supplies like clothing, fireworks, and food for those barbecues, they might be in short supply this year. NBC News correspondent Stephanie Rule tells us what you need to know.
Joe, summer will be here before we know it, but already some of our favorite summer staples are getting more expensive and harder to find, from hot dogs to t-shirts, even fireworks.
Memorial Day is just around the corner, but getting those seasonal essentials may be a little tougher this year. Many summertime staples are in short supply, driving up the cost of items like poultry, pork, even ketchup.
So part of the reason we're seeing higher prices than the grocery store is because we have higher prices at the farm.
But it's not just food. Getting your hands on summer clothing like t-shirts and swimwear, even fireworks, could get tricky, with imports for both down from last year. Looking to get away on a road trip? Expect to see gas prices rise this summer, up 34% higher than where they were last year. Or opting to be poolside at home? Prices on chlorine tablets have doubled in some areas and could spike up to 70% over the next few months. So if you're not seeing what you want on store shelves, experts recommend shopping generic or store brands for a better price, asking local experts for help sourcing alternative items, and planning ahead to get the best deals possible.
Prices are expected to remain high for a bit, especially in meat and produce. And another factor, money. Between stimulus checks and record savings during the pandemic, people have money to spend, and that demand is pushing prices even higher. Joe?
All right.